Middle School. Maybe I'll come back to you someday though, Christy. I'm also the secondary lead librarian this year, which means they pay me a tiny stipend to do a lot of work. And I'm also the SCASL DEI chair of that committee.
So we are going to share a number of things. You might have noticed there is a bit.ly on every slide, so if you didn't get it on this slide, it's going to be on the next slide too. And that does have our slides, so you could follow along, you could share it later.
All right, so our plans for this session, we have like 3 major sections. We're going to talk about the foundations, basically why this is important to what we do. And then we're going to talk about the me plus the we. So the me is what you yourself can do with your library programming choices, and then the we is who we collaborate with. And ultimately that's going to be what benefits our students. And then finally we have a little bit at the end about collections, how we can use our books, and also some inclusive book lists that you can use for programming.
So, before we get going, want to acknowledge the rubber duck in the room. Because the reality is that right now being in education is hard. It's kind of always been hard. But being in education right now and being a librarian right now is extra hard. And so we want to we're not all sunshine roses pretending that your districts aren't showing up on the news. So we know this. But we also know that we serve all our kids and that we can't walk away. And that this is part of our professional ethics. If you had the pleasure of being in the awards luncheon, Jamie Gregory actually went back to our librarian code of ethics, and part of those ethics are that we serve all our kids. So I do want to acknowledge that, well, the rubber ducks are cute, but some of their faces might be what we are feeling like day to day. But knowing that what we do for our kids, what we do day to day, it's important. And that's why we're here. DEI is not going away. Diversity, equity, inclusion are always going to be some of our core foundations. So, speaking of what's always going to be important, this idea of equity. Y'all, before equity was a buzzword, it was what we did in libraries. Access. It's been what everything has always been about. That is the whole purpose of libraries, is to provide that access. Safety, and this is really, really important. Our kids know that the library is a safe place, but part of why they know it's a safe place is because they feel welcome there and they can see themselves and see others there. It's a place for student voice. It's a place where kids get to express themselves, and it's a place where we help them become the next generation that's going to save us from whatever else is going on right now. It's also about community connections. So your community might not fully embrace all the things that we think about with libraries. We know we are getting pushback from the community. ALA is acknowledging that for the first time, the whole idea of libraries is not, we're not in love with libraries. Like, a library isn't just automatically a positive place in the community, but those community connections are huge. The community we create within our schools, as well as the fact that we are helping our kids grow into the next generation. And then we have to give kids what they deserve. And our kids deserve the best. They deserve to see themselves, and they deserve our best. So, quick reminder, your beliefs do not make you a better person. You can share whatever the heck you want on Facebook. It's your actions. And this is why we call this DEI in action, because you can't just have the books on the shelves. It has to be embedded in everything we do. And if you've been around me, you know that I like to say this a lot. What we spend our time and money on shows our priorities. It is, in your personal life, in your professional life, in our library. And unfortunately, a lot of times we don't have much control over that money aspect. Raise your hand if you're subsisting off a Scholastic book fair. Yes. We've been there, donors choose. But we do have a lot of control over how we spend our time and what we do to invest in our programs. So that does show our priorities, and we can make sure that our kids show up as our priorities.
So I know I talked about this a little bit earlier, but when we were thinking of how we wanted to plan this, we were thinking about what exactly DEI in action would look like. And some of that is the me piece of it. What can you personally do for you and your library program? I would guess that would be your sphere of control that's closest to you. But we recognize that we have to collaborate with others in the building and make those things. And so thinking strategically about who we can collaborate with at our schools to ultimately provide what is good for kids. So we're gonna start out with the me, or the library practices that I can control that impact students. So one of the first things that we talked about is reading by example. So I know we all have our favorite genres. Christy loves a YA romance. I'm all about my nonfiction and other stuff. But try to read widely, and even if you are focused on your particular genre, are you reading about people from different cultures and religions? Are you reading about people with different mental and physical abilities? Are you reading about people of different races, ethnicities, and nationalities, gender and sexual orientation, socioeconomic background, learning styles, values, and viewpoints? And I think it's important to recognize that we all have our personal blind spots. None of us has that complete package from the get-go, so think about what your blind spot is and maybe start reading into that more.
Right. We know our mirrors and windows, and it is mirrors and windows for our kids, but it's also for us. I mean, I think about all the things that I didn't know until I saw it in a book. I still remember it was on the SCASL YA Book Awards list, Dreamland Burning. Y'all, until that book, I did not know about the Tulsa Race Massacre. I was a history minor. So it's important to, acknowledge that we still have lots to learn. And that says, that helped me open my eyes, because I know some of you are sitting there going, I don't believe she just said that out loud, but that is where I was. And when we read by example, we really want to make sure that we are making our reading visible. And small ways. So you can throw it on your email signature. All our Charleston librarians, they have their reading by example, because everybody contacts us by email. So when they get our response, they also know we are readers. You can have your conversations, because readers talk to other readers. Reading is a social activity, and just those small conversations can become, okay, really it's reader advisory. We're librarians and we can't help ourselves, but it's not a bad thing. Signs outside your door. I was at a school the other day where every single teacher had this, what I'm reading. And it was just, again, such a simple piece, but it made it very clear to every student who was walking by that these teachers are reading, and it showed value. Book collage covers are always impressive. I can never keep up with that. That involves 2 extra steps that I can't keep up with. But again, there's lots of ways to make that visible. And again, this is how we show that we are not reading just YA romance novels, but they're really good.
So I know this is another buzz phrase that we hear all the time, but representation matters. And I know actually I'm going to call you out, Ayana had a beautiful quote in your presentation yesterday about Viola Davis talking about seeing yourself represented is a huge thing. And it still matters, even though we've heard representation matters a million times. So think about, do your displays feature diversity all year long? Are you just throwing up your Black History Month display, or does your, oh no wait, that's the same month. I was gonna say your Cute Valentine's display also include African Americans, but that's the same time period. But that would be an example. This is really, started doing this a few years ago, but auditing your read-alouds. If you are a librarian that's doing read-alouds, who are the characters in your books? Are you reading only books about animal main characters? Are your books all white main characters? Just pay attention, and with intentionality, think about who you're reading for.
We all love creepy pair of underwear. But if the only books I love Creepy Pair of Underwear. The whole thing is great. See, I do read other than YA. But if the only thing we are providing as read-alouds are those funny books, the ones that we know the kids are going to, laugh and giggle at, they're missing out. We're missing a key opportunity. And that's not saying we don't read Creepy Pair of Underwear. We always read Creepy Pair of Underwear.
By the same token, if you're not always doing read-alouds, audit your reader advisory. And this is one of the reasons why we need to read widely, is so we can give that reader's advisory with different characters in different roles, different characters in different genres. Are you only recommending books about people with physical disabilities where they have to overcome hardships all the time? Because that's kind of a downer. There's a lot of awesome, you could have a physically disabled person in a sci-fi book. Awesome. So think about across genres and who you're talking about all the time.
And another thing to consider with reader advisory that I know when I was in my middle school library, I really did have to think, I'm like, am I only recommending certain books to certain people? So if a kid comes in, am I only, pushing them towards this book, or are my first recommendations always this, and this with different groups of students? And that's just something to be aware of. And it's easy to fall into that. And just when we're auditing our reader advisory, looking at what we're recommending, but also who are we recommending that to.
Rosie, you had a point?
I just had a point. I have a student who's a 4-year-old and he doesn't have any limbs. And so I always have a slide deck up of the cover of the book and the picture of the author. Because I want to make sure that both of those are represented. And one of the books that I read was, oh no, it's gone. How People Move, or what's that one with all the moving? I don't remember. Anyway, it's the author. It lives moves around by a wheelchair, and so he was like, oh, and so he had a connection that I don't think if I hadn't people of all abilities write books, and so that was super powerful to Forrest that he could see himself as a writer. So anyway, just to make you cry a little bit.
And on that token, do you use representative images? Do you have, if you're creating signage for your library, do they represent a lot of your students? And this other piece, and it's funny because, as always, we make things in Canva, but are you actively avoiding stereotypical images? Because let me tell you, when I made my Native American Heritage Month display, I was a little disappointed in some of the stuff I found in Canva. So just be thinking about that intentionally when you're making those signage.
As well as, it's not just what we're reading, it's also what we're saying, how we're interacting with people. So that inclusive language matters. In our district, we have over 33% of some of our schools have multilingual populations. There are, I think, 44 different languages spoken in our district, and Google Translate is your friend. There is no excuse to not communicate with all of our families, because it really is, and it might not be a perfect translation because it's still Google Translate, but there at least is an active effort for those families. They could probably figure it out. I mean, we have spoken with people who speak broken English, and we still know what they're talking about. If a family receives something in broken German or broken French or broken Spanish, they're still going to get the essentials out of it. Multilingual students are not just your translator. A lot of them want to help, but that is actually not just their job. It's one thing to be able to recognize their skill set because they're multilingual. I'm not multilingual, they are multilingual, but recognizing them for who they are as a person and that is one of their assets versus just what we depend on them for. So, oh, a new student showed up. Oh, you're gonna sit by so-and-so.
I have a definite story about that. One of my students at my last school, his family's from Brazil. He's from here. He knows Portuguese, but he's not comfortable in it. And people at my school definitely oh, here, help the new Brazilian kid, and he's not used to switching. And so that code switching ended up messing him up, and he really didn't want to do it, and nobody asked him, do you want to do this, or are you okay with doing it? And he was very resentful about it. Don't do that to a kid.
Using non-gendered language in groups. I know pronouns, yes. Y'all is, we live in the perfect place for non-gendered language. I love folks, I say folks a lot, but again, just providing space, not excluding, just providing space. Honoring all family structures, so donuts with dads, muffins with moms, we don't all have that. So a lot of our schools have gotten really kind of almost competitive with their, how are they going to come up with something that's still alliterative, but they start bringing in their school mascots, they start bringing in their administrators' names, so we've got, you know, coffee with Coker and, you know, all kinds of other ways of inviting the families without having to say muffins with moms and donuts for dad. And as much as we can, using asset-based languages. We want to look at all the things our kids can do instead of focusing on the few things that they may struggle with. Because I don't want people to point out all the things I struggle with. I don't want that to be first and foremost with how I'm identified.
So this is the part where we're going to talk about doing collaboration and outreach to impact your students the most.
So the beautiful thing about being a librarian, we get to work with all the kids, but we also get to work with all the teachers. And this is a huge opportunity to have major impact. Not just because there's all these studies about how we impact academic achievement as librarians, but because we have all these different resources that can assist them, and we can help make sure that what shows up in the classroom, not just the library, also is diverse and representative and inclusive. We want to, of course, make sure we're having inclusive stories. If you are, well, I guess it's not just middle and high school now, but if you are at a school that sends out a summer reading list, please talk to your English folks. I mean, we've got people that we have to arm wrestle to get a conversation with the English teachers. But if we work together, we're going to come up with, one, things that are probably a little more interesting for the students to read, more engaging, but also we know that there are inclusive stories. But also thinking about all year long when there's opportunities to bring books into the classroom, that's every day, all year long, we can help make sure that what is showing up in those classrooms is also the best for our students.
And I'm the queen with the intentional curation. I'm a big reader, surprise, but I definitely am the person that finishes a book and it was like, oh, here's science teacher, here's this book about this cool scientist from like an underrepresented group, or just, you know, get them to think about different books, because our teachers do a lot too. In theory, we're probably reading more current things than they are, and so sometimes it just helps to have that little nudge, because if they're gonna have to look for a book, it's overwhelming. And if you are like intentionally being like, here's this great book that applies to what you're teaching, that's really nice.
And then we save the day, we're heroes. Yeah. They give us a cake.
I wish. Wow, working with our multilingual teachers. You start this one now.
As far as the apps and software, just making sure that we are taking advantage of things like Google Translate to make sure that we have clear communication. The multilingual teachers also, a lot of them try to kind of bridge that gap and make sure that our students have what they need for their classroom. They might not know that all of our databases have translation into multiple languages. That's a quick, easy thing that could be a total game changer.
And I know that can be hard depending on what school you're at. Your multilingual teacher, maybe they're part-time or not. I'm lucky in that we have two because we have such a large population. So if you can, work with them. Our multilingual teacher brings the kids all the time so they can have their special checkout time. We also do like skills and prep. So for instance, testing's coming up every year. We do our big how to use a dictionary lesson because that's an accommodation for a lot of them on state testing to be able to use a bilingual dictionary. But they're using Google Translate usually, so it's a skill to teach. And so think about those ways that you can intentionally partner with that teacher.
Valuing student voice and contribution, this kind of goes back to our multilingual students are so much more than just translators. They have their own experiences. They have the opportunity, not the mandate, to share their culture and their family with us. And that's a really important thing that when we work with our multilingual teachers, they often have really close relationships with those families, and we can make sure that the library is part of making the students and the families feel like they're part of our community.
I had a really great story about that. We had some new students start in the middle of the year, and we, in Berkeley County, we are the ones that give out the computers anyways, so we're gonna be a first stop. And so in addition to giving our new student from Yemen the Chromebook, we were like, here's a picture book in my mosque, and she brought it home and shared it with her mom. And it was like an instant connection. She loves it in the library now, and it was a really easy thing to do.
And then linguistically and culturally inclusive collection. It is not always the easiest thing to find books in other languages.
And it's
I was gonna say, the Low Country, we have had a huge influx of Portuguese speaking students. Y'all, where do you get books in Portuguese? You can find them here and there. You're not getting a great variety, and they're $45 to $50 for a paperback. So it's really, really tough, but we do want to try to make sure that as much as we can, we are offering this. A lot of digital books will offer translation, or they can use Google Translate, which is not a perfect thing, and it adds an extra step to the reading process, but it is, again, trying to put something accessible in their hands. But we want to make sure that what we are putting on our shelves is linguistically and culturally inclusive. Anything else you want to add?
Work with your exceptional education teachers. I'm actually going to start with the middle one. Do your exceptional education students come to the library? I'm really lucky in that my exceptional ed students, they can come every week. We do a story time and an activity. It's fun for me because it's a little bit of time where I can be really creative. It's my most creative lesson of the week because I'm not really tied to a specific standard or anything. We just did recently this amazing book called Listen by Evelyn Clenny about how a deaf girl was able to be a major percussionist. She was the world's first solo percussionist. And the kids were amazed by it. She has a whole website of amazing videos, playing with different sounds. We'll do different activities. We read Shoei for Black History Month and created a quilt. Like one of their things is, find motor skills. So we were able to match patterns to create a quilt and talked about the different squares. So there's so many different interesting things. Like I love it because it gives me a chance to actually play and do really creative things as opposed to just like, here's a database. But at the same time, we also do use databases. We look at culturograms and explore different countries. Another thing that is really important is, as always, our accessibility features. There's a lot of things that we can provide that way. Before I was at this school, I'd never had any visually impaired students. I have 3 in 1 grade now. So I've learned, it's been a big learning curve for me. So it allows me to work with our visual teacher. And I've learned a lot of things about Bookshare and all the different resources I have available for them. So really, those adults are the experts on those students. And I gain as much from them, I think, as they do from working with me.
And again, using those accessibility features to make sure that the students can stay connected and feel like they are part of everything. A lot of the school I used to work at, the exceptional ed teachers worked with me and they would say, okay, this kid is in 8th grade science. They are really, really struggling to get the concepts, and so we would find a differentiated article on a database that was written at a more accessible level so the kid could get the background, have the knowledge, and be ready to go and keep moving with the rest of the group. We've got so many of our databases now have the dyslexic font. That is something that a bunch of your exceptional ed teachers probably don't know. And that's a really, really important piece. And then collections that serve all ability levels. Yes, we have high-low books, but we also are trying to make sure that we are working with the exceptional ed teachers as well as our students to make sure they know how to use Destiny, because you can search by interest level, you can search by, different other features that will make sure that the right books end up in their hands.
Oh, working with our school counselors. We have a lot of common with them besides just GEBs. So social emotional learning and bibliotherapy is, I feel like, a gimme for our job. We can find those books that students need for different emotional needs. So that's a hugely important part. Do you want to add to that?
Just that even if your district is moving away from the words SEL, bottom line is, I know. But the bottom line is that need will still exist. We still want our kids to read books about being kind. We still need to show them books about what it takes to be a good friend. They still will always need books about how to handle losing or disappointment, and whatever you call it, that is in books, and that goes hand in hand with the bibliotherapy, and we know that books heal. I mean, raise your hand if in the past month you've read a book where you were like, oh, I needed that.
Oh, yes.
I needed somebody to put whatever it was on the page for me to think about something a different way. Our kids are the exact same.
Another piece, though, of our guidance counselors that we don't want to leave out is the career exploration piece. I know especially once you get to middle and high, that's a big thing. So making sure that we can show them what resources we have, and also making sure that it's inclusive and, once again, available for all of our students.
Okay. This is like one of my favorite quotes, and Lonnie, of course, found a couple of amazing books to go with this. But if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. All right, Shirley Chisholm, who was the original person about bringing her own folding chair and showing up, we have the opportunity to be a voice for all of our students. We see all of our kids. We have a different relationship with them, and we have a chance to help their needs be known. We have a chance, an opportunity to make sure that they can be heard and are seen.
Also, side note, Shirley Chisholm is a Verb is not just a great book about Shirley Chisholm, it is a great book about verbs. So it's a good teaching tool.
So we want to make sure that we are leveraging our collections. Y'all are librarians, you have, from what I've heard, some coursework about book selection, this professional training that you're supposed to have. So we're not going to go into a lot of the direct collection piece, but we are going to assume that, yes, you know that these books belong, you have them in your collection, so let's leverage them because they matter to our kids. I love collection development. After I just said we're not going to talk a whole lot about it, but it is really, really important that you are able to show the planning that goes into your collection development. None of you are going on Amazon and buying the top 10 books. None of you. I guarantee. I don't know all of you, but I know none of you are doing this. But that planning lets you look at short-term and long-term needs. So that short-term, oh my goodness, I just got a visually challenged student. I need to think about what's available. I need to think about that. But also, oh my gosh, everything that I have about civil rights is all struggle and no celebration. So that's long-term. And then think about that impact on the students, what that means for them.
Yeah.
I just thought that when you were saying this, I've started, because I feel the need to cover myself at this point, so I've started printing out, file it as a that analyzes your purchase, your list.
Yes.
And I've started printing those out and keeping them as documentation when I'm ordering books so that they can see, in case they want to say that I'm biased or whatever. That it's a very diverse list and something that, you might need that evidence at some point.
No, that makes perfect sense, but making use of those tools to make sure that what you are purchasing actually matches up with your plan and what you are showing is needed. Of course, we want to know policies and make sure that you are clear on your district specifics, but one of the best ways to look at DEI is see what else is the district saying they want to do. So they say they want to improve literacy. Guess what? You need some inclusive books so the kids want to read and the kids feel seen. So they say that they want to, make sure that you have a welcoming environment. That's what we do. But being able to connect to those larger things, even if we, aren't going to go word for word, we're looking at what are their bigger targets and showing that having this diverse, inclusive collection matters. And then what you were just talking about, perfect, transparent, that we're not hiding anything. We really aren't indoctrinating our children. We're trying to make sure they're cared for and that they feel seen.
And then maybe they read sometimes.
That too, that's a bonus. But then the selection, of course, we're thinking curriculum, student interest, the mirrors and windows, and then weeding. If any of you are hesitant about weeding, invite me. I love to weed. But at the end of the day, your kids deserve the best. They deserve the best. Lonnie made a comment in her previous session that after she weeded her nonfiction, her clerk's like, oh my gosh, it almost looks like we have more books. Well, that's because they're all the nice, shiny things that are worthwhile are out. So things that are out of date and unappealing are gone.
I thought you were going to say my other thing is I don't want books with 90s kids. Well, now 90s are cool again, but in theory, I don't want books with 90s kids on the cover.
Yes. And we have tools in Follett and Mackin that do help us make use of those. Diversity tools, the audits, this goes exactly. See, you set us up perfectly. Thank you. But the smaller audits are more manageable, and we do have tools to do that. I know when I first started learning about diversity audits, I was like, oh my gosh, I've got 12,000 books. What am I supposed to do, and how am I supposed to do this? You're not, okay? Possibly going section by section or saying, I'm really going to look at the 300s. That's a reasonable thing to look at because you really actually need to open those books up. You might need to do a little bit more background. I don't know who this author is. I don't know, what this is about. Follett and Mackin both have features that allow you to do this. They do have the diversity audit. You can set up and you can look for very, very granular things. They put it out as a visual, which a lot of times is easier for your administration to understand, and it makes a bigger impact. Or even if you're going to a social studies group or you're going to a English group, it's easy to do and it's quick to update. So
There are always, of course, drawbacks to those because it's computers that are looking at the books and not an actual person. I know one of the big things is if a book is older, it may not have all the tags that are going to pull it into those reports. So there are still different considerations to make, but yes, the visual tools are nice.
yes, and you know your situation at your library, so always consider what's the time versus the outcome. Is it worth the time to just say, I did a diversity audit, or is it worth the time to say, I'm taking a lot of extra time to look at my list and really make sure that they fit with my bigger collection plan, and I'm really making sure that everything I'm purchasing is very balanced and aligned. Yes, those criteria, it's so much better than the nothing we had before, but it's so far from what we actually really need. But yes, if you have Bud Not Buddy sitting in your collection, lots of you do, It's not going to show up as a book that is under African American, just because it's a few years older and the tags aren't there. So, but the real idea of this and being aware of it is how it impacts your kids. So what does having the right books for your kids mean for them?
Ah, yes. So leveraging your collection. It's not just enough to have the book on your shelf. If it just sits there, there's really not a point. So think about creative ways to leverage your collection. Your displays, whether physical or digital, make sure that they represent different portions of the population. I talked about this in my last presentation too. Thank you, Christy, because I hadn't visited Destiny collections in a while, and they're a lot better than they used to be. There's still some stuff I don't like, but
They're still from Follett.
they're still from Follett.
You're gonna have to click 3 times for when you
Hopefully
should
there's no
click
reps.
once.
Yeah. But they're a lot better, so that's a way to have digital displays, and then if you have Discover, Sora, Mac and Via, anywhere that you have a digital display. I even have, I'm sure a lot of y'all saw on Twitter, the really cool flip books where they can flip through and see the different titles. I definitely stole that idea and use it and make sure that they represent different portions of my student population. For collaborations, connect with your classroom teachers, like we were saying earlier. Provide them a variety of texts, maybe ones they wouldn't always think of. For your read alouds, make sure that those new books you purchase, read them. Make sure there's active engagement and you're sparking curiosity. And then your reader's advisory, make sure you're introducing your students to those new options and not just hoping they fly off the shelf.
Okay, so far we have not given you anything that is rocket science, because we want you to see that this DEI in action is really the things that you do every day matter, but you need to keep doing them because they matter. All right.
Okay, so speaking of Destiny collections, we thought we would be really spiffy, and instead of just showing like pictures of books on slides, we would actually give you links to different Destiny collections of inclusive book lists. We gotta make sure they're not private though.
They aren't.
Okay, good. So you can actually use these. If you don't have the book in your library, you can remove those and reuse these as needed. But we have ones for inclusive biographies, inclusive picture books, inclusive nonfiction, inclusive graphic novels, inclusive fiction for middle and high, and inclusive fiction for elementary. I will let you know the inclusive fiction for elementary is the least populated one because I am a middle school librarian and I don't have a lot of those books. And then I would look up titles, and then I only had access to the Berkeley County Library ones, and so I don't know their collections well enough to have put a lot in that one. But that's where you can add more.
And Lonnie and I did learn that if you've got a friend in another district, you can create a shared collection. So I'm in Charleston County. I created the collection. I started it. I invited Lonnie as an editor, and then she could only add what she had access to, but I could add what I had access to, and then it's public for everybody. So that was something I didn't know before because I've never had a chance to try it. But
I also learned something, pro tip, and I said this in the last one. For me, it's really easy to create a Destiny list on the back end side, and you can import that into collections if they're books in your personal library. So I did one of all the Berkeley County libraries and tried to import it, and it didn't work, and that was sad.
Well, now we've got time for questions, but again, we weren't trying to say we've got the way to change everything. It was more just a reminder how important it is to keep doing the things, not just buying the books, that's step one, but to do the things that really impact our kids, do the things that connect with our teachers, do what it takes to make sure that our kids get what they deserve.
And also, I know DEI is scary buzzwords, but if you don't, I guess if you remove those words from doing it, these are things that we do already, or should be doing already.
This is what it's really all about. So,
Questions?
any questions? this room, so, hey, LaShawna. No, that is a very, very real concern. Our district had a big conversation about that this fall, as part of one of our PDs, because it is hard to, when you know that your whole community is up in arms about XYZ topic, and here's a new award-winning book or something that was on a YMA list, or something that's on a South Carolina Picture Book Award list, that you want to take a step back. My first thing is make sure that you are very, very familiar with your district selection guidelines and with the reconsideration guidelines. And then, really, truly, it's the process. And I have had to lean into that a whole lot, but I also keep coming back in my brain. Something I can never get out of my brain is something Jennifer Lagarde said years ago. And she was like, if my discomfort is making me this scared, imagine what that feels like for that kid. And I can't stop thinking about that. So that is, you know, choose courage over comfort. And I guess I just think about what our kids deserve, and knowing that our kids deserve accurate, positive representations of their lives. All of our kids deserve to see accurate, positive experiences for all different types of people.
I think also too, there's a situation in my district where the first board meeting with the new board, they fire the superintendent and pass the thing where they're gonna have a committee to do all the books. They haven't done anything with this committee. This committee is not, nothing has happened since that proclamation. One of my librarians just talked to our superintendent. He's like, yeah, that hasn't gone anywhere. But I still have some librarians who are like, oh, I don't know, there's this committee, should I buy this book? Buy the book, the committee's not there. Like, do your regular selection, go by your policy. Like, if we can't be afraid of the boogeyman if it's not even there at this point. So I think as long as we ground ourselves in our best practices, that's the important part.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no.
No, but it's scary, and it
Yeah.
doesn't feel good at all. And that is part of my job, is to work with the schools that do have questions, and it feels really bad. And we also have to go back to, we know not every book is going to be for every reader, but that book is for some reader, and we have to continue to serve our entire community.
More people to saying that, because I just feel like I'm very ride or die about it. I'm
Same.
gonna buy the book, right?
I got my SCEA lawyer.
Right. And I can't. It's like, you know, I'm Black, Muslim. I'm the person they want to erase. So I have no choice. But there are so many people who, you know, might want to lean into comfort and instead of being courageous. I have no choice.
I think too, and this is something like that I run into, sorry if there's anybody from my district here, I run into the frustration of, I think within our own districts, like not everybody's gonna be on the front lines. I'm willing to lose my job if I have to, because I know I can go work at my friend's restaurant. So I'm the one that goes and speaks at all the board meetings, and
Can all of us do that?
I don't know. I mean, I guess, yeah, it depends. But, you know, like, and ultimately, like, I have a fallback option. I don't want to do it. God, I hate to be a waitress. I like the money, though. But anyway, I know not everybody's going to do that. But there's other things. So, like, if you can organize within your district to be like, hey, I'm not that person, but I can get the information together. Like, Tamara has all of those great talking points. That's something somebody can do without putting their name and face out there to the board meeting. So your creepy board chair says your name 14 times during a meeting and skeeves you out. Happened to me in real life.
But you also said something that's really intelligent, you know, like you said a lot of really intelligent things, but to join those state organizations that are so willing to reach out and be that voice. I can't tell you how many times the SCEA, the South Carolina Freedom to Read, they've reached out to me to say, what are your thoughts? What are your opinions? I always go to things, but they're like, send me your, without even asking me to put my name to things. They want to read my words. They want to share my experiences. So there's a lot of ways that you can advocate, that you can share without putting your name out there even. So if you haven't joined, PSTA or SCEA, you need to join, because there are people who are willing and who want to go and be that voice because they understand the positions that we're in. They understand that, as much as so many people say there's no retaliation, we know how difficult, your position can be. So join these organizations and not just join, be active in those organizations. And it does take some time. I'm very, very, very active in SCEA, but I tell you, it's been so worth it to know that every time there's a challenge, and not even in my district, I lend my voice to Pickens, to Greenville, to Beaufort, to Charleston. I mean, I'm going to show up with other librarians, even though it's not my school, because it's not my school this time, but it could be, and I definitely don't want to be alone, and I'm not going to let someone else go through it alone. And so the beauty of these organizations is that they work with everyone across the state. So if you haven't linked up with one of them, sincerely, join.
Also preaching to
They're
the
both
choir.
here, yes.
SCASL will help you out.
Yes.
Tamara's helped me out a lot with craziness from my district, so thank you.
The legal part, I think.
Oh yeah, the legal part.
Sometimes people don't realize.
Yeah, but I don't know if, also though, like, SCASL sent, I don't know if you folks realize, SCASL will send out all those letters to people too.
Yeah, absolutely.